I'm going to call to order the November 12th, 2019 regularly scheduled board meeting for the Richland 2 Board of Trustees. If I can please have a motion to go into executive session.
I move that we recess in public session and convene executive session for the purpose of discussion of student appeals, student admission requests to the district's adult education program, and litigation update.
Motion's been made by Dr. Caution Parker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Mackey. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote at this time. Mr. Shaw, we're taking the vote now on going to executive session. What's that? Oh, all right. We missed it. All right. 5-0. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. I'm going to reconvene the regularly scheduled November 12, 2019 meeting of the Richland 2 Board of Trustees, where we just returned from executive session to discuss the items that were mentioned in the motion to go into executive session. At this time, we will have the inspirational moment and the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could have Colonel Walker please come to the podium. Colonel Walker is on base with Fort Jackson, and with Veterans Day is coming to give us our inspirational moment for the evening.
All right, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Members of the board and the community here. Colonel Doug Walter, I'm the deputy commander at Fort Jackson. I'll apologize up front. Wasn't necessarily prepared. I found out about this just a couple days ago. I was at another speaking engagement, so on my way back yesterday, tried to put together some things to say. I find this particularly inspirational. I'm not sure how well I can articulate it to you all, but hopefully you will find it as well. Just to give a little context and background, because I think it's important to the rest of the stories. And again, this is not a prepared speech. It's going to be a bit of a storytelling. But I was raised on a farm in southern Indiana. I was one of 8 kids. My parents made sure that I went to church, I went to school. They made sure that I got good grades, that I behaved in school. And when I got home, I worked on the farm. That was just my life. I learned to help others in the community, donating our time and talents. Turned out that my talent was apparently found on the end of a shovel, but there were benefits to that, you know, and we got a lot of snow up there at times, and we lived in a very rural area, and took the county some time to get out to clear our roads. So my father would hook a plow up to the tractor, and he'd start clearing the roads. And there were 3 widows who lived on that road, and it was about a 2-mile stretch, and he would dump the kids out, and we would shovel sidewalks and driveways. But I learned that those widows might not have been good at clearing snow, but they could make hot chocolate and cookies. So there was benefits to everything. But that's the environment I grew up in. My dad was very clear that the 8 of us would all go on to seek further education after high school, because we wanted to ensure that we had opportunities that he did not have. So what I learned there, I learned hard work, discipline, accountability, teamwork, working with, just with trying to survive with 7 other siblings, a willingness to help others. And I credit my parents for doing all they could do to set me up for success, and any failings I've had along the way are certainly my own. But that was the foundation that I set off with when I left home to attend the United States Military Academy at West Point. When I left, I'd spent about 99.9% of my life within 2 hours of where I grew up. I'd been to 4 states, and 3 of those were within 20 minutes of my home. I grew up in the tri-state area. So I was well-read, but not well-traveled, and a little naive, but I guess probably most 18-year-olds are. But I certainly, I think, probably assumed that everyone was kind of like me and had the same upbringing and had kind of come from a similar environment. And to me, things were kind of either right or wrong, and you either met the standard or you didn't. And the world was very, very black or white. There were not a lot of shades of gray, I don't think, in my mind when I left home. So I'll fast forward to a few years later, and I was an Army captain commanding an infantry company in Kosovo, down the Balkan Peninsula. And of course, I commanded about 150 soldiers. And as you can imagine, from all walks of life, socioeconomic backgrounds, what have you. And as it happened, about 4 months in, the ground war was getting ready to start in Iraq. This was 2003. And we were extended from a 6-month deployment to a 9-month deployment. And as a result of that, the Army said, hey, we'll allow all the soldiers to take a 2-week leave. They can go home and then come back. And so as would happen, I had taken command down there. Part of taking leave, coming back, you had to take a urinalysis. And poor specialist Jeremy was the first soldier under my command that ever came out positive on a urinalysis. So it was kind of a rough time for him because I wasn't going to play games. So I took the appropriate action. We removed him from the platoon. He lost rank, he lost pay, was made to do extra work and extra time. And I certainly, made his life hard. Now there was a delay in justice due to redeployment. Things were shelved as we waited to get back to Germany, our home station. And so he didn't get separated as quickly as he would have. The day we were returning back, we found out that we would be deploying to Iraq in 7 months. And then those days later, he came to me and said, and I'll say this, in all that time, he never complained. He just worked his tail off, showed up every day. We gave him the worst jobs we had, and he did them well. So he came to see me in Germany when he found out we were going to Iraq. He said, hey, sir, I'm sorry, I screwed up. And he explained to me the situation. I was back. I come from a kind of a rough area, and I was hanging out with the exact friends I joined the Army to get away from. And I had a bad night, and I did something I shouldn't have done. I take full responsibility, but sir, I want to stay, and I want to go with this unit to Iraq. It was compelling to me, and so I went to the battalion commander, made the case, and he agreed with me, and we threw away the packet. And young specialist Jeremy deployed with us, was nearly killed, but he did his job, and he was proud for having done so. And then there was Private Travis. Private Travis was not a good soldier. Had a problem with alcohol. He liked to fight, got in a lot of trouble. In the days leading to our Iraq deployment, I was on the verge of separating from the Army, but again, fate intervened and I ran out of time. And so he ended up going. Now, over the course of time, a new commander took over, and I had moved on. This commander happened to be the best friend that I had in the Army. And one day I had the opportunity to go back and visit my old company and talk to my good friend. And in the course of that, I noticed that Private Travis, the man that I had nearly kicked out of the Army, was now a corporal, and he was in job of protecting the commander, my good friend. So I had a conversation with the first sergeant. The first sergeant's the senior enlisted man in the company, usually handles personnel moves, and we'd been together in Kosovo. We were close friends, and I pulled him aside, and I said, what in the heck are you doing? I said, that man's my best friend, and you're putting this guy in charge of his security. He said, sir, trust me, he's changed. He's a better man, and he's a great soldier. And I said, hey, I hear you talking, but I'm not listening. I don't believe you. Well, fate intervened again. That my battalion, I was no longer in it. Deployed to Fallujah 15 years ago, and was part of the assault on that city. And in the course of those events, my good friend who had taken over the company from me was killed. And rather than put somebody new, because it was a pretty intense situation, if anyone remembers that. So rather than put a new company commander in, they reached back to the old one, and they flew me in there, and I took over the course of the battle, and then we returned back to our normal area of operations for about 3 more months left of the deployment. Now, as you can imagine, he'd been my best friend, and so I was upset. I was emotional, and I was going to make sure that we accomplished the mission, and I was going to win the war on my own, because I was going to not let my friend die in vain. And so we were doing a lot of operations on one particular occasion. We were walking through this small rural village in Iraq. We were ambushed, machine gun rounds were going overhead, and before I could react, I was tackled and ended up in a trench. And if anybody's ever spent much time in rural Iraqi villages, you know they don't have a lot of plumbing. And so they ditches, sewage ditches, and as I looked, it was Private Travis, now Corporal Travis, who had tackled me before I could react. We were in a ditch, and as I looked down, I found myself from about the knee down in a pool of human feces. Wow. And I remember distinctly looking at him and say, well, if it's all the same to you, next time I'll take my chance with the bullets, if that's okay. But anyway, so we continued on, and again, I was up to make up for the loss of my friend. Taking a lot of risk I didn't need to take, too far forward, too aggressive, kicking in too many doors. And one night there was a knock on my door as we were back on our forward operating base, and Private Travis came in to see me. Well, he was Corporal Travis by now. And he said, "Sir, we need to talk." So I said, "Okay." So we shut the door, sat down. He said, "Hey, look, we appreciate what you're doing. We appreciate you sharing the risk. But you're going too far." And he said, "You're not going to prove anything to anyone by getting yourself killed. You're the commander of this company. You need to step back and you need to command it. And you need to let soldiers do what we do, because we're counting on you to do that." And so it wasn't lost on me the irony that the college-educated kid from a solid family and background just got an education from the kid who'd grown up on the streets of Brooklyn. No question about it. Probably the best education I'd ever received. So I tell you the stories of those two kids, Private Jeremy and Private Travis. What I learned over the years, and what I learned from them is my job was not just to apply standards blindly. That there's a reason why kids do what they do. Nobody joins the Army to fail, and I'm sure I'm probably preaching to the choir here with a bunch of educators who probably learn this all the time with the kids in their classroom. They don't want to fail. They want to succeed. It's just sometimes they lack life skills to know how. My job was not to blindly apply standards. My job was to understand what led them to those actions and see what I could do to help them. Because I learned that inside even the kids I thought were the very worst, there was goodness. What those kids found, in the Army, in that unit, in combat, was purpose and direction that they hadn't had before. They were members of a team. They were valued and indispensable members of the team. And in that, they had found purpose and they had found success. And so I took that lesson from then on to look at every kid that ran afoul of standards and tried to understand why and what I could do, not just to hold them accountable, but how do I get them to succeed. And it just so happens this summer, June 25th, actually, one of the soldiers who was in my company in that fight, Staff Sergeant David Bellavia, was awarded the Medal of Honor. And so there was about 30 of us who were at the White House and the Pentagon this summer that got to share in that event. And one of them was Sergeant Travis, who's now Mr. Travis. And he's married, he's got 2 kids and one on the way. He's gainfully employed and he's living a good life. And on the way back, I was driving from a speaking engagement yesterday. I got a text, and he just said, "Hey, sir, just want you to know I'm thinking about you and that you are loved." And it was about the best thing that I could have gotten. So those 2 young gentlemen who had run afoul of Army standards and who, if I had had my way, would have eliminated them from service very quickly, turned out to be 2 great soldiers who did a lot of great things, and they really opened my eyes to the potential that's in everybody. So I apologize if I went long, sir, but that's what I have to offer.
Thank you. For last minute, you did a fantastic job. So thank you very much, Colonel Walker. And we certainly appreciate the military, all the veterans in the room, and those that serve the country. And it's great to hear the personal stories behind what we see in the news. So thank you. We will now have the Ridgeview High School will present the color guard for this evening. pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. On. Co-turn. Mark.
All right, we will now move on. If I can have a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Agostini.
I move to amend tonight's agenda and remove item 10.3 as needed for items discussed in executive session from tonight's agenda as well as all future board agendas, and with that removal, approve the agenda.
Okay, so you're asking to approve the agenda with the removal of item 10.3.
Yes, I would like that removed from tonight's agenda as well as all future agendas.
Okay, I can't.
Okay,
I don't think I can do it for all future agendas, but I can do it for tonight's agenda. We can have a discussion about removing it from future agendas. I can't
Okay.
cement future agendas like that. So.
all right.
Okay, so the
Thank
motion
you.
is to approve the current agenda with the removal of item 10.3.
Correct.
And, okay, do I have a second? Second by Dr. Elkins Johnson. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair, if you could just explain the reason that you have 10.3 there.
So item 10.3 was added, which is as needed for items discussed in executive session. We added this to agendas, and of course, this is always part of our agenda that the board votes on at every meeting, and the item is there in the event that we can only approve things that were previously, that were discussed in executive session, but we had to have previously announced that it was going to be discussed in executive session. So it wouldn't be an item where we didn't previously announce to the public that there was going to be a discussion about that item. It is there just for things that were discussed in executive session, should there be an issue that comes up that needs voted on. Again, legal counsel provided that as an option to us. That's why it's there. It doesn't mean that we have to use that item. It's just there as an option, and to date, we have not used that item for any voting to date. Is there any further discussion?
Just one clarification. Thank you,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Manager.
Further discussion?
Yeah.
Ms. Agostini?
Thank you. And that's sort of to my point of we could potentially have about a half dozen things on our executive session agenda. And for full transparency to our public, I think that we do need to specifically state what in fact we do plan to vote on during the general board meeting. So it's clear to everybody what the vote will be on, because there could be 3 or 4 items that we discuss, but who knows from the general public which one of those potentially could be pulled for us to vote on. So I want full transparency to the public. I have great trust in our chair and our superintendent that when they are drafting the agenda, that they can thoughtfully go through and make sure that every item is covered in the executive session vote part. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Agostini. Further discussion?
Just clarity for me. I heard what you said, and I also hear what Mrs. Agostini is asking.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
guess my question would be, is there anything that we would discuss that they would need to know within 24 hours or not? Because I think that would dictate whether or not we really need 10.3 or why we should keep it here.
So we would have had to have announced what was in executive session at least 24 hours in advance. So anything that's in executive session being discussed would have to be given 24-hour notice. So I can't add an executive session item within that 24 hours between 24 hours and the actual board meeting. Did that answer your question?
It did, but I think now I'm totally confused, because if we have to give 24-hour notice, then why do we have it? I thought this was more of an emergency backup in case.
It is an emergency backup item for the voting component.
Okay.
But again, I have to give
Okay.
24-hour notice for what's discussed in executive session.
Okay.
And we couldn't use item 10.3 for anything that wasn't previously announced
Okay.
as part of
Thank you,
executive session.
thank you.
Did that
Mr.
help
Chair.
clarify? Yes, ma'am.
And I just want to make a comment. This is not policy, and as we have heard so many of the leaders sitting up here advocating for complying with policy, I feel this is an unnecessary practice.
Okay. Any other discussion on this motion in the second?
I'll just share
Yes, sir.
that this was a result of, for the public that is interested in this information, this was a result of, and it's an issue where we had several board meetings ago where we do diploma petitions. So individuals in the state who did not graduate from high school and receive a diploma, as you know, can petition the state if they, for some reason, didn't get a diploma because they didn't pass HSAP. We had that item on our executive session, portion of our agenda. We failed to list that item in the voting part of the executive session agenda. And so since we discussed it, but we didn't list it as something that we were going to vote on, we were unable to vote on that item at that board meeting and had to subsequently wait 2 additional weeks before we could approve that person's request for the petition to be granted to then submit to the State Department, which also takes a period of time before the petition or the diploma will be awarded. This would have given us an opportunity to go ahead and vote on that item since we had already listed it in executive session, which would have cut down some time it would have taken for that person to get their diploma awarded to them. And so we have not voted or used this item as of today, but should we put something in executive session and then fail to list it as something to vote on, this gives us an opportunity to do that. As the chair stated, nothing can be voted on that is not listed in the agenda 24 hours prior, so the public is fully aware of those items. And as Ms. Agostini stated as well, it is not a policy. The setting of the agenda is not a policy, it is a practice, and this is an item we added to be more I guess, to support should we have any issues as it relates to something like the petition for the diploma.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, at this time, we'll have the vote. Who are we waiting on? Okay. Can you just tell her what, yea or nay? Okay. That's correct, just for today, yes. All right, motion passes 5-2. We will now move on to special recognitions. Dr. Davis.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we have before you Ms. Libby Ruth, who will share with us special recognitions for the November the 12th, 2019 Board of Trustees meeting. Ms. Ruth?
Thank you, Dr. Davis, Chairman Manning, and board members for this opportunity to recognize some of our award winners and welcome community members, parents, and students who are here tonight to be recognized or help us recognize recent premier accomplishments. And we will begin with some happy state champions. Oops, sorry. We're going to begin with our individual state champion, Dan Todd from Spring Valley High School. If you'll please come forward with Principal Jeff Timoni and your swim coach, Michelle Davis, along with Athletic Director Tim Hunter. Dan won an individual state title at the Class 5A State Swimming Championship. He won the 200 freestyle with a time under 1 minute and 44 seconds. Here's how his coach, Michelle Davis, describes Dan. He's always been an amazing swimmer and a key athlete on our team. Dan has been on our team since the 7th grade. He is very well rounded and capable to succeed in pretty much any event. He is an amazing sprinter, but is also capable of swimming longer mid-distance events like his championship, the 200 free. Dan's 200 free was an exciting race. He set a goal to go out in a certain split, achieved that goal, and came back as planned. This year, Dan was voted co-captain of the swim team, where he stepped into a leadership role and helped build team spirit. He is undecided on college, but I believe he's looking at several military schools, but they will definitely have swimming in his future. Congratulations on your state championship and best wishes for continued success. And I don't know if y'all caught the very big smile of board member Ms. Agostino there. She was his first swim coach. And now let's bring up our other state champions, the 5A state champion Blythewood High girls golf team. If y'all want to come on up. And I'll ask Principal Matt Sherman and Athletic Director Barry Mazzell to come forward as well. Team members are Lindsay Hoyle. You want to raise your hand? Corey Langford, Maddie Love, Elizabeth Madden, Jocelyn Paez, Paige Palucci, Isabel Soito, Ella Stalvey, Elizabeth Wentz, head coach Jason Mickle, and assistant coach Brad Salter. Now, this was an amazing accomplishment for our Blythewood High girls team. Not only did they knock off what we referred to at our last meeting as the New England Patriots of high school golf, which I'll tell you more about in a little bit, they claimed the school's first team championship in any sport since 2010. The Bengals came into the tournament as top-ranked team in Class 5A and led by 3 shots after round 1 and 4 shots heading into the back 9. That's when freshman Ella Stalvey birdied 3 of her final 4 holes. Sophomore Paige Palucci shot a 75 after an 87 on the first day. Lindsay Hoyle and Elizabeth Madden had top scores too. Now back to those New England Patriots. The team unseated powerhouse Lexington High School, who was going for their 3rd straight title and their 14th in 16 seasons. And a little side note, I've stood in another board meeting at another school district and talked about that Patriots team. So it is very a proud moment for me to be standing here and talking to the team that knocked them off. So congratulations. Nobody repeat that back over in that other district. My children might still be there, but seriously, I am extremely proud. Congratulations, Blythewood High School girls and Blythewood High School. We are so proud of you. And I can pull this back too. Y'all get this. Congratulations again. Not done yet, Miss Agostini. Mr. Sherman, I should have called you before you walked all the way back. Sorry about that, because I'm going to call up one of your students, Kristen Hardy from Blythewood High School. Kristen has been selected by Essence and Ulta Beauty as one of 6 teenagers in the country to be part of an empowerment mentorship program. It's for inspiring teens who want to break into the beauty industry. After submitting a 1-minute video on why she is passionate about a career in the field, she was selected from hundreds of applicants to be a part of this special opportunity. This program will allow Christian to participate in panels and mentoring sessions with Ulta Beauty and Essence experts. She'll be featured in a digital docu-series to be filmed on location in New York City and Chicago, and she'll attend the 2019 Best in Black Beauty Awards in New York. And I guess what might be the best part, she received $10,000 that she can use for college. And Christian, is it, are you already developing products? Is that correct?
Yeah, so technically, the program is actually concluding now. So the collection's actually able to be right now. You can go check it out.
That's awesome. What's the name?
It's the Girls United.
Okay. All right. Well, y'all go check that out when you head out of here. Now I'd ask Kimberly Norris Jones from Richland Northeast High School to come forward. And is Dr. Suber got standing in for Dr. Suber, is our assistant principal? Hey, good. Ms. Norris Jones has been named South Carolina's Outstanding Earth Science Teacher for 2019 by the National Association of Geoscience Teachers. She was honored last week at the South Carolina Science Council Convention. Ms. Norris Jones was selected for her willingness to go the extra mile to help her students find success. When she realized she had many English language learners in her classes, she learned how to translate assignments into different languages. As an IB school teacher, she has learned to add a global component to her classes. She held a technology-free day so students could see how students in third world countries learn. And when she's not in the classroom, you might find her teaching students how to knit. Last year, her and her students donated 33 scarves, hats, and shawls to the homeless. Congratulations, Ms. Norris Jones, on this premier award. We're going to call up two schools in groups for the next award because unlike last meeting where I restricted our schools and they could only bring so many, I tried to make up for it and these two schools got to bring several people, so we're going to divide them up into groups. But let me go ahead and tell you why they're here. They were named as Special Olympics National Banner Unified Champion School. To receive this, they are the staffs and students must demonstrate their commitment to inclusion. Inclusion is an important word in Richland too, by meeting 10 standards of excellence defined by the Special Olympics. Among those 10 standards are having an inclusive school climate that exudes a sense of collaboration, engagement, and respect for all members of the student body and staff. The entire school community is very accepting of people with intellectual disabilities, and all students are included in sports and encouraged to take leadership roles. Each activity or sport has an adult coach who has received training on inclusiveness, and students of all abilities are given opportunities to take leadership roles during sports and activity training sessions. At least 2 whole school engagement activities are held every school year, and a unified club meets regularly. So let's meet our first school's representatives, Bookman Road Elementary. Of course, we have Principal Dr. Kendra Hill, and she has with her Team Tammy Altman, Renee Nord, come on forward, that's to call your name, Christine Lewis, Isabel Ramos, Mindy McNeil, Rena Nord, April Brownlee, Tanya Spangler, and Tammy Alton. And the other Bookman Road beacons will stand as well because they invited others. Y'all come on, come on up.
My chair.
And we're gonna show the banner. Bear with me. Congratulations. I'm just going to stay back here and not try to move this thing up and back. And now we're going to meet our inclusive Gators. They are Principal Dr. Andrea Berry, Shane Bagwell, Jackie Norton, Julia Beck, Latonya Ishmael, Melissa Kramer, Sarah Phillips, Becky Ann Struthers, and Susan Woodley. Is that all our Lake Carolina Gators? Now, we talked about bringing the, Martha, you want to come on up? While they're, Martha and Goodman, both schools were going to bring their banner, but Dr. Berry and them had already hung their banner, and we decided that we would not upset maintenance by taking it down and then putting it back up. So we know what it looks like, though, thanks to Bookman. Hold on. Let's give our unified schools a great big round of applause. I got it. I'm going to get some new wheels for this thing. Now I'm going to turn, Martha Jones and I are going to switch places.
There you go. I do.
Okay.
Right here.
Thank you. We are getting close to the season of giving, but we have friends at Service Solutions who are in the spirit already. And so I'm going to introduce those folks in just a minute, but they are going to present you with a check for the school district and for the foundation for $25,000. And I wanted to let you know, what that money will be used for. $5,000 of that money will be used to help buy books for R2 Ready to Read. As you know, R2 Ready to Read is our book collection campaign that we do year-round so that we can give books to our pre-K through second graders every year at the end of the year to take home and keep their home libraries growing. $20,000 of that is set aside for 10 $2,000 scholarships for our students. And those employees of Service Solutions who have children or grandchildren in our district that are graduating have first shot at that. So, we are very, very grateful and appreciative for getting this money. I'd like to introduce you to Seth Farrell. I'll introduce these other folks in just a second. He has a few words to say, and then we'll all take a picture with the giant check.
Chairman Manning, Dr. Davis, members of the board, we appreciate the partnership, opportunity to give back, especially your assistance in helping us help our employees and the young people in the district, many of whom you had here tonight. It's impressive to see, and I always enjoy this part of my job more than any other, so thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Board members,
I'd like to introduce the other folks from Service Solutions. Mr. Farrell, if you'll go ahead and stand up there. Valen Emery, who is the Division Vice President. Mr. Farrell is the CEO of Service Solutions. Jennifer Frizz is the Regional Director. Sim Williams is the Resident Manager. Yolanda Blackwell is our own manager and knowing of everything here in the district. And the board's going to come up. Amy Kane is here representing the foundation. So we will, and Will Anderson, who is our Director of Operations. And we need the big check. Yes.
Board members, that concludes special recognitions. If you will just give us just a minute, so those who are here for special recognitions, you can stay, but you are not required. So if you'd like to leave, you can do so at this time.
Students, if you have homework, you're excused.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's a good point.
From the
Yeah,
meeting.
clarity. The superintendent said. Man, we'd have a full house every week. We'd be busting at the seams. Mhm. That's what Chick-fil-A, like the football games, if you bring the stuff from the meeting, you get a free Chick-fil-A sandwich. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There you go, if we get the meeting done in less than an hour. All right. Thank you very much. We will now move on to our consent agenda. If I can have a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Mackey.
I move to approve the consent agenda for tonight's board meeting, November
Motion's,
12th, 2019.
thank you. Motion's been made by Ms. Mackey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Holmes. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. Motion passes 7-0. I'm going to take a moment of privilege as the chair here, and I need to back up for a minute. We had a technical glitch when we did the approval of the agenda and the vote. If I can have Dr. Elkins Johnson, if you want to make a statement on the fact that that you changed your vote and it didn't work in the system.
Well, I see it's correct now, but actually, the yes and no and abstain is so close together that when I pushed, I realized that I chose the wrong one, and I went back to make the change, and it did not change. But my answer is yes.
So you were voting yes, not no.
Yes.
Okay. So, right. So for the record, there was a technical glitch, so we're not changing your vote. It just wasn't reflected accurately in the vote.
Yes.
So that will be a 6 yes, a 1 no. And so Tamika, if you can change that in the system, again, based off of that technical glitch. Okay, so we will now move on to, yes, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Elkins Johnson. And I'm sorry, I'm getting myself back on the agenda. So school focus, Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the board, for item 7.1, we have our school focus. Our school for this evening's board meeting will be Catawba Trail.
Good evening, Chairman Manning, members of the board, and Dr. Davis. I'm Jennifer Gillespie, the principal of Catawba Trail Elementary School, and with me tonight I have my two assistant principals, Mrs. Tia Jones and Mr. Marion Kelly, and we are proud to showcase Catawba Trail's mentoring program. Two of our ongoing partnerships have been with Fort Jackson. The 260th Battalion sends soldiers out to our school regularly as lunch buddies, reading buddies, and also they assist with field day. We also are very fortunate to have a military and family life counselor on our campus 2 days a week to support our students whose families are part of the military. And for our boys and girls, in 5th grade, we have our GEMS program, which stands for Girls Empowered, Motivated, and Successful, and our Colts to Stallions. So tonight we've prepared a short video to highlight some of the life-changing experiences that are afforded to our students through our mentoring program.
hesitant at first, and then when I got into the school system and met the beautiful kids here, I was just really happy about it, really inspired that I was able to give back. 1 year, going into my second year, and I'm very, very excited because my mentee that I had last year, who was in kindergarten, I'll have her again this year. And I am terribly excited, really. She and I have just grown very, very close to one another. She respects me, I respect her. I'm flexible with my time and my schedule with her. And she has grown, really grown by leaps and bounds. And so have I.
Could you tell me why you wanted to be a mentor?
Well, at Oak Grove Baptist Church, our pastor, Pastor Willie J. Thompson, invited us, a bunch of us that have retired, recently retired. I worked in the federal government for about 35 years, and I had the opportunity to find out about the Trailmates, this mentoring program. And so we came over, we did an orientation, and I tell you, I spent over 35 years working with kids and had the opportunity to come back and give back to the community. And so that's the reason that I decided to become a mentor at Catawba Trail.
I would love to read to them. I love to garden. I love to teach maps. Just anything they need me to do.
Thank you. Board members, Dr. Davis, are there any questions?
Thank you. Board members, questions or comments? Ms. Agostini?
I just want to make the comment, I'm a mentor and I absolutely love doing it. But what I loved about your program, I live in Wood Creek Farms, was seeing that the Blake participates. And what a wonderful partnership, not only for you, but for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, other questions or comments? Thank y'all very much.
you.
Absolutely. And next on our agenda, we have our public participation. Our first speaker this evening will be Mr. Danny Cottrell. And I do want to remind you that we do video these. It will be on YouTube. You know the rest, so. Name, yeah, give your name, please.
Do I need to sign a consent for the YouTube? No.
Yeah.
Dr. Davis, Chairman Manning and members of the school board, I'm Danny Kittrell. I am the president of the Viking Track Club. And if you'll bear with me, there's part of my presentation that I would like to read specifically to make sure that I cover all points. I do appreciate the opportunity to get in front of you and speak and address some of the concerns that we have regarding our program and the facilities for our student athletes. A brief history of our program, not to take away from any of the state champions that were addressed earlier today, but to go through our program. Our girls program has won 4 consecutive region championships. They have won 12 region championships since 2005. Our boys program has won 12 consecutive region championships, has a current win streak of 127 dual meets, and these programs have won multiple state titles. In our minds, these are premier programs within our district. Our programs and facilities host numerous events throughout the course of the year, which include region championship meets, state qualifier, state championships, and the Bojangles Track and Field Classic. I'd like to address some concerns that we have regarding our facilities and our programs. Number one, it's my understanding that there was an inspection done of our track that is at Harry Perrone Stadium. What I am requesting is on behalf of the track club that any concerns or deficiencies identified with the track be presented to the track club. I'd also like to know what the district's plans are to go through and address those repairs that were identified during this inspection. It's also my understanding that the field inside Harry Perone Stadium will be converted from grass to turf. My concern from a track and field program is the necessary equipment for the discus, for flags that have to be established in the area, for tents that need to be anchored. Who will be responsible for those added expenses for our program? The Bojangles Track and Field Classic is an event that is a premier event in the country, hosts over 3,000 student athletes. We have representatives from as far away as New York, west to Texas, and as far south as the state of Florida. And I apologize, I'm running pretty quickly because I just noticed the time. My concerns for this go far beyond just our program itself, but also with the impact that this has on our high school, on our district, on our city, and on our county. When you look at these events that we host, you will notice on that if we do not host these events, our school districts will go through added expense.
Mr. Cottrell, I'm going to cut you off. If you have a written record that you'd like to give to the district, if you can please, I don't know who from the district can take that from you, Will or Cleveland, we'll grab that and they can make copies and give it to the board. And I appreciate you coming to speak to us this afternoon.
And I apologize, who does that go to?
I'm sorry, the two gentlemen, Will or, I'm sorry. There you go. Thank you. All right, Mr. Philpott.
Thank you. I'm Gus Philpott. On October 29th, the board made a major change in board policy GBEB staff conduct regarding a line pertaining to possession of weapons on school grounds. And the motion was to approve a revision as presented, and the motion was seconded and passed. The motion as presented included a line that hasn't been added to the board policy yet, and that is regarding policy JICI, which defines weapons. That's an important, it took up a lot of time over 3 meetings. And I noticed in the board policy that the policy itself, as can be viewed online, has not been updated. So staff and teachers would not now know that they are subject to misconduct if they possess any item capable of inflicting injury or harm, which is hereinafter referred to as a weapon, to persons or property when that item is not used in relation to normal school activity at a scheduled time for the student. Policy JICI is a policy that pertains to students. It doesn't pertain to staff or teachers or other employees, and I think the district would have a hard time convicting somebody or finding them liable of violating the student policy, because anybody charged with violating that policy would say, hey, that applies to students, that doesn't apply to me. The student, staff and teachers are also placed in an awkward position if they hold a concealed carry permit, and if they wish to be armed driving to school grounds and home, they would lock up their weapon in their car, and the way the policy reads now is they would be in violation of the board policy because their weapon would be in their car on school grounds. It's lawful under South Carolina law for them to have the gun in the car securely held, locked up in the car, but the school policy would find them to be in a state of misconduct. So I would suggest that some more time needs to be spent on policy GBEB, and perhaps you might wish to form a committee, not only of board members, but of the public, staff, and teachers. I also noticed that the minutes for the last meeting did not include the superintendent's statement that he had rescinded the authorization for 2 employees to carry their weapons on school grounds. And that's an important decision that the superintendent made and the board made, and would ask that that be added to amended minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Philpott. Next, I have Mary Ann Wright.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Dr. Davis, school board members. My name is Mary Ann Wright, and I'm a resident of Richland 2 School District. I am also on the board of Midland's Organized Response for Equity and Justice, or More Justice. More Justice is a growing coalition of 34 local congregations. We are interfaith and diverse in race, religion, and socioeconomics. We have come together around our scriptural mandate to do justice and solve serious community-wide problems at the root. 2 years ago, over 500 of our members voted to work on education and have been pushing for a greater degree of transparency and discipline practices in our local schools, as well as the implementation of proven practices to build positive school climate, to better support teachers, and address high rates of suspensions. This past Monday, more than 600 of our members gathered to reaffirm our commitment to addressing this problem. Last year, each of you was invited to be at the Nehemiah Action Assembly. More than 1,200 people were present to hear your responses to questions around these issues. Only Mrs. Agostini and Mr. Manning were present. Hundreds of those present were residents of Richland 2, and in the face of such a serious problem, it was extremely disappointing to see the great majority of our leadership absent. Our teachers and our kids are too important. Therefore, we reached out to you again recently, Dr. Davis, to schedule time to continue the conversation around this issue. You did not schedule a meeting, but you did refer us to a district employee. However, more than 2 weeks have passed with no response to schedule that meeting and address the community questions. We also wrote you asking for a face-to-face meeting as well, and we have not received a response. Community members deserve to hear directly from our leadership. Please schedule that meeting. As we push forward on this issue, we are also working to address issues of mental health and affordable housing. Most recently, we also added crime and gun violence as a priority. The 2020 Nehemiah Action is on Monday, April 27th. At this meeting, more than 700 residents will gather to hear directly from each of you. We pray you prioritize your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our public participation. We will now have our legislative update. Dr. Miley.
Good evening, members of the board. You may have seen it in the newspaper, but we thought it might be important for us to start talking about this because it's important for next year's budget season. The Board of Economic Advisors, that's the entity that is charged with setting the revenue estimate for the state budget to be deliberated by the legislature for the upcoming year. The Board of Economic Advisors met on the 8th of November and revised their general fund budget estimate for the current fiscal year, FY 19-20, and they also made their first preliminary estimate for FY 2021, which is the fiscal year starting July 1. This is normal behavior by them. They had underestimated, the economy is growing faster, they had underestimated revenues for this current fiscal year substantially. They revised it up basically, we're going to have a $500 million surplus for FY 19-20, and they estimated and they revised their estimate for FY 2021 will result in over $800 million of recurring dollars to be appropriated in the FY 2021 budget. That's, to me, as far as I remember, that's a historically high dollar amount of new money. In addition, they have over $1 billion of non-recurring funds to allocate. So beginning July 1 in the budget deliberations that are going on now for the following fiscal year, the legislature's deliberating how to spend almost $2 billion. They haven't decided, obviously, that's early in terms of how they're going to spend that money. But we thought it was important for you to be aware because those discussions are going to be discussed. And certainly there'll be, I've been there before. It's terrible when there are budget cuts and there's not much money. It's worse when there's more money. And so the fighting over that $2 billion will be fierce. And we're hoping that the legislature sees the wisdom in allocating a substantial portion of that to the K through 12 school districts. That was just what I wanted to make sure you're aware of. We'll be updating you. That's going to change over the course of the year. And of course, the deliberations by the legislature will start seriously in the January, but just thought it'd be something that you'll be aware of in terms of your interaction with any other elected officials and legislators. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Holmes.
Thank you for that report. I sincerely hope that we can find it in our hearts from the legislature to use some of that $2 billion budget to give our teachers a raise. And if not a raise, then I think that and I've seen in other districts, one thing that I thought that we could possibly do if we get some of that money would be to give our teachers a bonus. So I'd like to, if hopefully we can find it in our hearts to use that money to allocate that towards our well-deserving educators. Just thought I'd put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Dr. Miley. Next on our agenda, we have our executive session items. Item 10.1, if I can have a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, Mr. Shad.
I move that we accept the admission request for student number 1 into the adult education program.
Motion's been made by Mr. Shad. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Holmes. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. Motion passes 7-0. Next, motion for item 10.2, student appeals.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, Mr. Shad.
For the moment, we're going to skip student number 1, student number 2, student number 3. But I move that with regard to student number 4, that we deny the appeal and refer to administration for placement.
Second.
Was that the completion of your motion? Sorry.
As well, student number 5 and student number 6 deny the appeals.
Does that conclude your motion, Mr. Shad?
That is my motion, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, is there any way possible we can pull 5 and 6?
Well, the motion's already been made the motion's been made, so I need a second on that.
Okay.
I don't have a way to do that right now.
I'm going to second the motion.
Okay, motion's been seconded by Ms. Agostini. Is there any discussion? All right, as soon as Mr. Shad sees this motion, to make sure that it's accurate.
Actually, for number 4, it's not quite what I said. Yeah, for number 4, I'm specifically saying we are denying the appeal and referring that student to administration for placement. Period. Or semicolon, and then, with regard to 5 and 6, we're denying the appeals.
Will we have this for a discussion?
It's up for one. Yeah, it was up for discussion already. We had a second. I asked if there was any discussion.
Right, I have discussion.
Okay, Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Okay. that's
Okay,
your motion.
thank you.
I guess my discussion would be, if we lump students together, then you only give us an option of voting yes for everyone and voting no for everyone, and that's not fair to our students. We say we want to treat students individually, but yet we're having the board who dictates their future to vote in a lump sum. I would like to have, and Mr. Shad, I would ask that you amend your motion to give us an opportunity to individualize, cast our vote for these students, because I don't want to vote all yes or all no for students that I don't agree with, and I don't think that's fair to our students. It's not fair to our public. And if you think about what the colonel said when he got up here, he spoke earlier about giving students an opportunity because they're still growing, they're still learning, we don't know their background, we don't even know what may have occurred with their actions or lack of actions, but yet we're getting ready to do a lump sum of students and force the board to either vote yes, no, or abstain from the vote. And I don't think that's fair to our parents. I don't think that's fair to our students. And if that is your student, that's parents, this is for you. If this is one of your students that's lumped into student number 4, 5, or 6, I would ask you to take demand and to force us as board members to respect your parent, respect your child, and to respect you and do an individual vote, because that is not fair to our students that we have an option of voting yes for all students, no, or to abstain.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Shad.
I respectfully decline the friendly amendment that Dr. Elkins presented without going into any specifics about what occurred in executive session as to each particular student. Tonight was no different than what we have done in the past. Every board member has an opportunity to state, those that are present have an opportunity to state whether they want us to take a student on individually. And if there's no statement from any board member that's present to do that, we have gone and done this type of block voting, because it does not appear that there has been anyone who said, and we use the term, pull this person out, which is what we're planning on doing with student number 1, student number 2, and student number 3. If there is a request by any board member to do a pullout, that's what we do. So we make a separate motion for that particular student, as opposed to student 4, student 5, student 6. We did have a lengthy discussion during executive session regarding each student, but particular 4, 5, and 6, I did not recall anyone, and you all can back me up, whether anyone at the time said that they wanted any of these students to be pulled out for individual motions.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Mackey had asked to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think my comment is redundant now. I just wanted to make it clear that this is tough business. No one wants to be in a position to determine the behavior of an adult, let alone a child. But I can't speak to what goes on in executive session. What I can say, per the motion that opened our meeting, is that we discussed each student who has filed an appeal ad nauseum. It is not easy. We bash our brains back there trying to make a decision, but what we don't do is lump people together and we discuss each and every student that has to be addressed, at least since I've been on the board.
Dr. Johnson.
Mr. Chair, let me address that. Yes, I arrived late at executive session, but I'm requesting now that we pull out 5 and 6. And if we say we don't lump students, I would ask that you watch what we do and not what we say, because if you look at this motion, students number 4, 5, and 6 is lumped together. So let me give you an example. For number 4, if I wanted to support that, I could not, if I wanted to, not support 5 and 6. So the only option I have is to support all of them or to deny all of them. And that is not fair to our students, and it's not fair to our parents. And once again, I would say, parents, when you have students who have discipline issues, I would challenge you to come to the board meeting and to challenge us to not lump your child when we have voting issues. And again, I would ask that student number 5 and student number 6 be pulled, because my motion and my vote will be different for 5 and 6 as it is for 4 based on the motion that Mr. Shad made.
I appreciate the comments. I do feel like it's a slight mischaracterization of how the process works, but I'll respect your request. At this time, we'll have the vote. Mr. Shad's motion in the second.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
the vote that's popped up before us, is it going to be replaced with the corrected version of his motion? The one that I have to vote on, I think, is a little bit
It's still not quite the way Ms. Shad, I thought you said it was
Oh, yes,
accurate.
it is. I'm sorry. My apology. It is. Number 4 is at the end. My apologies. Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize. I know y'all seen us do a lot of shuffling back here tonight, just a lot of technical things working it out, so. I'm about to wear this cord out beside me, shuffling my chair back and forth. Mhm. Motion passes 7-0. Let's sing, Tamika. No. Okay. So it came back up. Do you need us to revote, Tamika? Okay. Mm-hmm. It's the weather, for sure. Can I have another minute? At least I can have some fresh breath. Motion passes 6-1. Mr. Shad?
Mr. Chair, with regard to student number 1, I move that they return to their home school with services.
Motion's been made by Mr. Shad. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Ms. Agostini. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, once Mr. Shad verifies the motion is correct, we'll take the vote.
It is.
Okay. Motion passes 6-1.
Mr. Chair?
Shad. Yes, sir.
I move that with regard to student number 2, that they be returned to their home school with services.
Motion has been made by Mr. Shad. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Elkins Johnson. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. And motion passes 6-1. Mr. Shad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regard to student number 3, I move that we return that student to their home school with services.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Holmes. Is there any discussion? No discussion. We'll have the vote at this time.
That's correct.
And motion passes 6-1. Thank you very much. Item 11.1, certification of the delegates. Dr. Davis, are you presenting that, or I guess I just need a motion? If I can get a motion, please.
Mr. Chair, are there people who are interested in serving as delegates, and how many do we need to certify?
It can be any number. I think we've already had a number of folks who asked to participate. If there's anybody who's not listed, who...
Fine. I wasn't sure if anyone's already indicated. That's fine.
We did, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
But I want to make sure this is another opportunity for anybody else who didn't previously volunteer, wants to. This is the chance to speak up.
I did volunteer, but I don't see a list of,
It's the recommendation is here, yeah.
oh,
It's, if I can get somebody to make the motion, I think that's everybody who requested to.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, Ms. Shad.
I don't think I'm self-dealing here, but...
You're not, you're good.
I'm not, okay.
Okay.
I would move that the board nominate Mrs. Agostini with 4 votes and Mr. Shad with 3 votes to the South Carolina Delegate Assembly, with Mr. Manning serving as the alternate.
Okay, motion's been made by Mr. Shad. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Holmes. Is there any discussion? All right, with no discussion, we'll take the vote. And motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda, we have new business, no action requested. Dr. Davis, 12 without one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the board, we have a report from the Diversity and Multicultural Inclusion Office, and our DMI officer, Dr. Helen Grant, will be presenting the report to you this evening. Dr. Grant.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis, Mr. Manning, members of the board. It's a wonderful opportunity to be with you tonight. Once a year, I come before the board, and each year that I work, it's harder and harder to condense what I've done over the course of the year in the 5 minutes that I have in this presentation. So I will say to you, the information that I sent to you gives you a much broader idea of the work of our office. It's been a wonderful year, a busy year. We've done a lot of things. We're focusing right now this year on equity. The adoption of the board policy on equity is included in all of the presentations that I do. And so we're focusing at trying to bring everyone up to date in the district on what the equity policy is and what that means for our students. And I thought Colonel Walter and his comments tonight really was the wonderful precursor for what I would say to you as he talked about the men under his command and how he had to provide something different for each one of them and how he came to understand that they had some things that they brought to the table that he was not even aware of. Those are the messages that we're trying to send to our staff, our total staff, our administrators, as well as our teachers as we move forward. So in addition to the PowerPoint presentation that I've provided for you, also, you have the revised draft of the Diversity and Multicultural Inclusion Plan. Our first plan was adopted several years ago. We've made some progress, and with the focus on equity now, I thought that this was a good time for us to look at a draft plan. We've consulted across the cabinet levels in the district and had meetings and talked about what we thought should be included in the plan, because the plan is not just my plan. It's not just the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Inclusion. It is the entire school district working together towards diversity. And so you have that information as well. I wanted to share with you very quickly and introduce to you formally Mrs. Kelsey Carter, who is here this afternoon, tonight with us. She is our military family liaison, and she is doing a tremendous job. Would you stand up, Ms. Carter, so they can see you? She's under the Department of Diversity and Multicultural Inclusion and is working very hard with our military community, establishing and strengthening relationships with Fort Jackson, working with our students in the information. You'll see more detail about the work that she's doing. Also want to know that Ms. Kelly Johnson, who was in my department, as you know, is now our district ombudsman, so she's no longer on our chart there. And also to make you aware that the Project CARE Coalition's work has concluded. We did not receive additional funding from the federal government under the DFC grant that we applied for, so that work has concluded. We do lots of things in our office. We put on a lot of events. We have fun with our district, with our community. This is a list of just some of the things that are month-long celebrations that we're responsible for within our office over the course of the year. We do a community conversation series that looks a little bit different every year, but I want to invite you to the next event in our community conversation series. It's a documentary movie showing of While I Breathe, I Hope, and I've left with Ms. Sherman some invitations directly for each of you for that movie viewing. It will be on November the 25th. We put on programs and activities for our students and support work that is done in our schools. Many of our schools do their individual celebrations, but we try to support them, provide resources to them as well. Diversity is a fun program that we do for our district office staff. Once a month on the third Friday at noon, we get together informally. It's a bring your own lunch. We provide the tea for the diversity, and we talk about diversity and multicultural inclusion issues. And we're able within that smaller setting to take a deeper dive on a lot of issues. We've had some really wonderful conversations. We talk about privilege. We talk about bias. Right now we're talking about equity. This week we'll meet on Friday, and we're going to talk again about equity this coming week. We do outreach to our Hispanic community. It is the fastest growing segment of our student population, and so we support the Hispanic family liaisons that work in the district. We support Ms. Jolly and her program for Skills for Work and Life that's housed over at Windsor United Methodist Church, and any other programs that specifically benefit our Hispanic community. We want to support them to help them understand that we are there for them, that this is a home for them as well. Any student that comes into Richland 2, I feel like belongs to us, belongs to me personally. I take it personally, and so we do everything that we can to try to make sure that their needs are met. Professional development is probably the most fun of what I do because it gives me that opportunity to go out and meet with our staff. And professional development is provided from our cabinet level down throughout the ranks of staff in the district. And again, there's more information in what I provided to you. I have the opportunity to consult with our district staff about a lot of issues that come up. Sometimes a principal will call me and say, Dr. Grant, I have this going on. What do you think? And I'll sit and I'll say, I'm not sure what I think about that. Let me think a little longer and I'll call you back. And we work through it. But this just gives you an idea of some of the things that come up. We have multiple religions that are practiced in our district, and sometimes those religious ceremonies conflict with our school schedules. And so we're working with parents, trying to help make sure that they are able to meet their religious needs and also that students are able to meet the requirements of attendance in our district. The Diversity and Multicultural Inclusion Plan. I've provided the plan to you, and Ms. Sherman also has some hard copies if you would like the plan, so that you can see what we're looking at as we move forward. The focus is on equity. Our goals are divided into 4 categories. We have teaching and learning, human resources, communications and partnerships, and then finance and operations. And just as an example of a goal under each one of those, for teaching and learning, we want to see full implementation of AVID to help eliminate the opportunity gap. The AVID program is designed to eliminate the opportunity gap, and so we have to push forward with that district-wide to help meet that objective. Under human resources, of course, we want to recruit and retain diverse staff. Under communications and partnerships, that all communications from our district will be culturally relevant. And under finance and operations, to increase the use of small businesses, businesses owned by women and by people of color. I've introduced to you Ms. Carter, and I've told you about the Project Care Coalition, and my buzzer went off about 2 minutes ago, and so I will stop and be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Absolutely. Board members, questions or comments? Dr. Holmes, Ms. Mackey. Ms. Mackey, go ahead, Ms. Mackey.
Sure, yeah.
Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. Dr. Grant, I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. I know I have historically talked about equity and parity with different reasons, for different reasons in different areas. The thing I appreciate about you is that you inundate us with ways that we need to promote inclusion. Being equitable is not exactly the same for everybody. Parity is not the same for everyone, but inclusion is a step in the right direction. And I appreciate that. I know as board chair, we had a committee that was on diversity and multicultural inclusion, and we no longer need that toward the end of my tenure, because everything that you share with us in committee meetings, you share with us as a board. You find a way to incorporate inclusion into various programs. When I'm looking to see who's in charge, it's usually you, because you're making sure that you try to have inclusion. And no person is infallible. No initiative is infallible. There's always room for growth, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But I just wanted to tell you that I thank you for your spotlight on blind spots. You have a gift of being mindful of our diversity blind spots. Sometimes we have some issues with diversity and inclusion just because we don't see what we don't see. So thank you for your presentation. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. That was a great presentation. I do have one question, though. I know our district initiative has been on cultural competency, and I did not see that listed under the teaching and learning section. Is there still a focus on the cultural competency part? Because that's what we needed actually in the classroom, on the classroom level, to make sure those students were incorporating those skills and those teachers were getting those skills. So can we add that to the teaching and learning section? Because that's supposed to be one of our initiatives for the push for the district this year.
And it is, a lot of it is included in the AVID.
Mm-hmm.
There's a culturally relevant strand. Thank you. There's a culturally relevant strand as part of our AVID work that we're doing. We have Dr. Booty, and again, this year, doing the second year of a cohort of working with a small group of teachers from our schools on culturally relevant pedagogy. And so we have that included every time we have a professional development opportunity district-wide, so our district in-service, there's more than one offering on that area. So we are constantly striving to incorporate that. I have information that's available and any school can check out from my office if they want to do their own series of lessons on culturally relevant information. That information is there. So yes, ma'am, we are absolutely including that.
Okay, because can we add it onto the PowerPoint? Because isn't your PowerPoint going to go for the district? I think that that needs to be there because that is one of the things that we said we were pushing cultural competency. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Grant. I appreciate it.
Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Well, let me go back to Dr. Holmes' point. You already have it in there. It's under Goal 3. So if you go back and look up on the teacher and learning Goal 3, that information is there. But I want to say thank you so much for your detailed presentation. Just 2 questions, just for clarity. If you go back under DMI report, goal number 9, you indicated that you're going to solicit, train, and assign at least 1,000 mentors to students. Just wanted to know how we're going to select these students. Since we have 28,000 students, how are we going to select the top 1,000 students?
I am working with, through Dr. Davis, with Dr. Morgan, our lead school counselor, who leads up our mentoring programs. We're in the process of developing that program now, so we don't have the details of that worked out. That 1,000 mentors is over a 5-year period with what we're trying to do. And I don't want to speak for you, Dr. Davis, if you'd like to explain more about it.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. Thank you, Dr. Elkins. That's a good question. The mentors, it's 1,000 mentors. So we're not going to limit it to 1,000 students. So each mentor can have multiple students as a mentee in order to increase the number of possible mentees that we can impact. And we will take those mentees, of course, based on teacher and administration recommendation, but we'll also have mentees and parents self-identify that they're looking for mentors. And this is in addition to all the other mentoring programs that we have going on right now at the various elementary, middle, and high schools, the various programs that are sponsored by school counselors or school administrators. But this will be a laser focus for the district on addressing 1,000, identifying 1,000 trained specifically through the district's philosophy and framework or what a mentor should be, and then identifying those students. And then that will just be the start of increasing mentors every year so that we are building a coalition of mentors and mentees throughout the district that can span from K to 12. Yes, ma'am.
And my second question, if you go up under, I'm not sure, do you guys have the PowerPoint? If not, I can just continue. Up under the HR piece, goal number 3, you indicated that each student basically will have at least one teacher of color before them. And I guess before they leave, is it elementary? Before they leave elementary school. And I guess my question to that is, based on the demographics that we have, how did you come up with that number of at least one teacher of color instead of multiple teachers of color?
We wanted to start And so this plan is not something that's set in stone. If we see we are reaching one at the end of year one or before we get to the year one, then we can expand it and add to it. But we needed to have a starting point so that we need our principals thinking about when you hire new teachers in, as you have the opportunity to hire new teachers in, think about whether or not you have sufficient numbers of teachers of color in your building so that each student in your building can have an opportunity to have a teacher of color before they leave elementary school. And so that was our starting point.
And thank you so much, but I would love to see that number increase, because a starting point of at least one teacher, I was that starting point back in 2001 of at least one teacher. And I say that because many times we thought once we had one teacher per grade level, we met the quota. And we had many of our elementary schools that only had one teacher of color on each grade level when you have 7 and 8 teachers. So I would love to see that number increase, because I don't want anyone to get comfortable thinking, okay, I've met that quota. We have one in kindergarten, one in first, one in second, one in third, fourth, and fifth. So just food for thought. I'd love to see that, because we're already at that at least one target. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up, I don't quite believe we are at one right now that we can guarantee that through a student's matriculation from K to 5, they will have at least one student, one teacher of color. And so that's where the one comes from. Currently, the rate of minority teachers in the state, of course, is so specifically when it comes to minority males and men of color, I think we're at about 2.8% in the state. Fortunately, in Richland School District 2, and believe it or not, I use the term fortunately, I think we're about 5%, almost close to 6% when it looks at this. So we are faring better than the national average. However, our goal is to increase that and give every student an opportunity to at least before what we're trying to do is to guarantee that would at least happen. Because right now, as Dr. Grant stated, because of how some grade levels are structured and because of how some schools are structured, it may not be the case where that may happen. So we have to be intentional as we're setting up those grade levels and setting up those courses, and we're looking at our teacher ranks. What are going to be some of the decisions we have to make to ensure that this happens at some schools? At some schools, it will be a lot easier. I think probably at some of the schools, and at some schools, it is going to be a little bit more of a challenge to either assign and hire and ensure that we have high quality instructors. But we will take a look at that number, and we'll get back with you on more of a detailed report on kind of where we are, so you'll know where our basis is, so maybe we can justify if we need to make some shift, and we'll be happy to consider that. Thank you, Dr. Douglas-Johnson.
Okay, and then I finish up with this. Now, not so much you, Dr. Grant, now it would go back to HR because they have so much money, and I think we're going to talk about that later with Dr. Miley's presentation, that the rural initiative, that's what that money is for, to go out and to recruit teachers to come. So maybe we need to use some of that money to go out to those HBCUs and to recruit those African American teachers into our district, because we're in a huge century of not having African American teachers, but we'll talk about that.
We do. Again, as I just stated, we are well above the national average in Richland. So I don't want to send the message, although we are working in that direction, the pool is very low and very limited, but we do have a recruitment plan that is in place that is gaining momentum and is working. But we are at roughly almost close to 6%. The national average says that only about 2%. And that's particularly men of color. When just minority teachers in general, I think we are still above the national average when we're looking at the minority minority teachers in general. But we do have a plan in place. And I think we are well exceeding what the expectations, well exceeding the numbers at the national level, but we have our district goal as well. And part of our district goal is recruiting one initiative is 100 men of color in the next 4 years to add to the numbers we currently have in order to ensure, and that's K through 12. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Mr. Shad.
Thank you. I'm encouraged to see that equity is all throughout the DMI plan. Again, I would applaud the board for making that part of policy now, as we did in August, and even further encouraged that administration has taken that baton and moving forward with it. I did want to point out as well in the teaching and learning section, for those who are listening or watching on YouTube, that Goal 6 specifically talks about decreasing the number of students who are disproportionately suspended or expelled from school, i.e. trying to cut off the school to prison pipeline, that we are specific about what we're doing, maintaining the philosophy of discipline, talking about the discipline matrix. Cultural relevance will be considered when we talk about interventions with regard to student behavior, which I know you're doing that also with professional development, Dr. Grant. So again, equity is our focus. It appears that administration is responding in tow, and we're not in budget season yet. But another thing that we can do other than just setting policy is putting our money where our mouths are and making sure that this particular department has sufficient funds to make sure that these programs can not only continue, but that they can thrive. And also, because events cost money, programs cost money, and there's a human resource impact as well. We need to make sure that you have all the resources necessary budget-wise to make sure that we are saying what we are doing, especially when we're talking about addressing inequitable challenges that our schools face, our students, our faculty, and all throughout the community. So I applaud your efforts, and I hope that we can do that as well. I know, sometimes it's a zero-sum game. You put money somewhere, and that means you take money from somewhere else. But as I understand it, we got more money that's coming from the state. Hopefully, a good bit will be coming from the state to K through 12, and of course, our district. But your budget is where your morals are. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Dr. Holmes.
Dr. Grant, again, thank you again. I did see your cultural competency in the DMI section of your report, but I was referring to the PowerPoint on the teaching and learning section. I would still like that added to the PowerPoint. I did see it in the DMI report. Thank you very much.
Yep. Ms. Mackey.
I just wanted to make, I'm not sure, I want to take a point of personal privilege if I can, Mr. Manning.
Yeah, go ahead.
And recognize Dr. Ron Donaldson in the back of the room, who is a local hero. He is a professor at USC who does a great deal of civil rights work. So I just wanted to, Professor, but I digress. Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Grant.
Thank you. Dr. Grant, I appreciate the work you're doing, and Mr. Shab made the comment that your values are where your budget is, and we may still be the only K through 12 that has a dedicated diversity officer in the state of South Carolina. Yes. We were certainly the first, believe still the only one. Not the only one now.
We're not the only one any longer, no,
okay,
sir.
but we were the first.
Yes, sir.
We were the first, and we've led the way in that, and continue to make a lot of headway. We certainly, if not the first, one of the first to have a policy on equity in the state of South Carolina. Continued focus on that. We spent a lot of time, our board has spent a lot of time on equity and diversity in many formats, whether it be the work that we do in the community with contractors, having, again, one of the first minority opportunities for minority contractors and vendors to come in and have access to all of our principals and key leaders in the district. So we certainly still have a lot of work to do, but I do appreciate the progress that we have made and are continuing to make in that area. And I was on a panel today, and one of the questions that came to me was, how do boards outreach to the community? I was very proud to say that with one of the many things that we do are the outreach around diversity that you do, the community conversations where we go out into the community and allow opportunities and safe spaces for folks to talk about diversity and equity and opportunities for those conversations, some of which I don't understand because they're in Spanish. Yes, sir. And I have to have translators. But
yes, sir.
Thank you, and I appreciate your team that you bring with you to all your meetings, your family support. Appreciate you all being here as well, and thank you again for your time this evening.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Well, since you went ahead and said it, I understand that we are going to have a new student to the district in a few years as well. Congratulations to you all, first grandbaby. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda, we have our first quarter financial statement. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the board, for our first quarter financial statement, we have Dr. Harry Miley to present this information to you this evening. Dr. Miley.
Thank you. And I did not put that timer on Dr. Grant's speech. I did not do that. I know that's my reputation. We have for you the first quarter financial report. As I've introduced this first quarter every year, I give you caution. I make sure you understand that the first quarter is barely underway with the district's budget. Revenue streams do not match expenditure streams because a lot of our revenues come in much later in the year. I also take this opportunity to make sure that's a good time to remind everybody what an advantage of having an adequate fund balance is, so that we can make sure we make payroll and not have to borrow money to make payroll when those early months of the disparity between revenue and expenditures occurs. On the first quarter revenue, I wanted to mention mainly just one thing, and that is our total revenue is 12.3% of our total revenue estimate of $301 million. Our 5-year average is 12.3, so we are right on target and on the same pattern as our last 5 years. I think that's the most important takeaway from all the individual categories, because they vary. For instance, in one of the categories on the first page, this legislature invented a new revenue stream last year, state aid to classrooms, which wasn't there the years before. It used to be in the base student costs with the EFA. And so those revenue patterns look a little bit odd, but total 12.3% of our revenues we received through the first quarter. And that's exactly right on target with our 5-year average of 12.3%. Our expenditures to date of the $301 million, we've spent about 21%, 20.96%. Our 5-year average is 21.4%. So again, we're right on target with our last 5 years average spending, slightly below it, but still it's pretty early to tell. We've got two different charts on page 3 and 4, our other funding from the Education Improvement Act, where this used to be about 4 or 5 years ago, it was $40-something million. Those funds have been cut slowly each year. We're expecting $25.6 million of that. We've spent about $3 million, and we've received about $3 million. The next page, page 4, our special revenue categories. We're expecting, and some of these may change. For instance, some of our budgets from some of our federal funds and some of our state allocations, we have not even received those budget projections from those funding sources. So that budget line of $27.8 million may actually change over the next few months, and will probably change by the next time we give you a second quarter update. But of those $27.8 million, we've received about $650,000 and spent about $3.9 million. Again, that's a good example of having to spend money before we received it and having the advantage of having the fund balance to adequately fund those expenditures. Page 5 is the board report. This is right on target with other years. We have a budget of $390,000, and so far to date, we have spent or encumbered about $160,000 of that. And the last page, page 6, is our capital project summary. As you can see, we talked about this in some of, I think, Mr. Anderson's presentation of the capital update of the last board meeting. Of the $468 million, so far we've spent to date less than $9 million. We haven't been slow to move. we've been slow to spend. We've got a lot of design projects underway. We have a lot of things in the process. And once ground starts getting turned and major facilities start being built, we'll speed that spending up quite rapidly. But as you see, we've encumbered almost $30 million of that 468. And then we're finishing up the last 8% for 2017-18 and 2018-19, as you can see on the bottom half of that page. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Board members, questions or comments? Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Dr. Miley, on page 4, number 338, what is the at-risk student learning fund? What is that?
Fund 3.
Number 338 is on page 4. Page 3.
Thank you. I was having trouble with that.
Number
Fund 338, at-risk student learning, it's about
Yes, what is that?
$5.3 million.
Yes.
Is Sean Suber is in the room.
Okay.
And he is much more qualified to answer that
Okay.
than I am.
Those are funds that are allocated for our at-risk students. So students that are scoring the 25th percentile and below, we allocate those funds for them. We pay for TAs, we pay for summer programs, everything that we do with Title I funds.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Suber, and
Yes,
maybe
ma'am.
you can answer it, if not Dr. Davis.
Okay.
When we're talking about at-risk student learning, is there any way that we could use those funds also for like additional hall monitors or TAs? Because of the at-risk population, we do need more hall monitors and teacher assistants, or we can't use it for that?
No, ma'am. We utilize that
Okay.
strictly for math and ELA.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to sneak it in, you know. The other one is number, Dr. Miley,
Yes, ma'am.
number 371. Maybe I should know this, but it's just not coming to me. What is CSI?
It's Fund 371.
What does CSI mean? What is that?
I will have to turn back to Mr. Suber.
You owe me.
Yeah, oh.
What does it stand for?
I'll get you a paycheck Friday.
Appreciate that. All right. We have certain funds for schools that qualify based on state criteria that meet the specific needs of, let's say, there's a special ed gap between the regular classrooms and the school's achievement to that of the special ed.
So what does CSI stand for?
Comprehensive something.
Okay, that's fine.
instruction. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I thought I was missing something. Okay,
We have that, and we
Okay.
have TSI as well.
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
The other one is number 397. Aid to district. What exactly is that?
That's not me, that's you.
Aid to districts.
Yes.
That's it.
Can you come to the mic? So,
It's a rolled up fund that the state used to allocate in individual line items, and they rolled them up and grouped them and just called it aid to districts.
so what do we do? How do we use that money for aid to districts?
I will have to find out.
We actually use it for special education, professional development, and instructional technology.
Now, there's a line item that says professional development. So this aid to districts, what is that professional development for? Is that for special needs teachers or certain areas?
It is changing from that earlier 311 fund where it says 311 at the top.
development.
That is transferring over to 397. And as Ms. Davis said, we share that pot with IT, but it is that same professional development fund that we allocate to schools by teacher. That's included in that amount. That was previously called just 311.
So what are we going to do with the 311 monies? Are we going to add it to 397?
Shelley, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that 311 money we have been spending out, or it's being converted to 397. And I think part of it is instructional technology, instructional support services, and then it is some of it is the PD funds. A portion of it is where, again, we allocate the monies to schools for professional development by teachers.
Okay, if you guys don't mind, if you can get back with me at a later time and tell me exactly what we're doing with 311 and 397 and how it's being used and distributed to the school district, to the schools. Thank you.
Absolutely.
May I ask if that's something that we can just simply provide in a board brief to the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, other questions or comments? I think, Dr. Miley, the takeaway here is that, we have funds. I don't think people understand exactly how earmarked many of these funds are for very specific things. So when you look at our school budget and you say we have an extraordinary amount of money, much of it is already tagged for specific things, and we can't cross those buckets. We don't have flexibility. So when our state legislature and our federal government talks about local control, I guess this is how they determine we get local control within the buckets they give us.
Exactly. In fact, all of page 3 and 4, all the funds in page 3 and on page 4 are not in the general fund that you approve.
Right.
And the reason is that most of these, or all of these, are earmarked for specific schools and or activities that we have no discretion over, other than making sure we spend it for those things.
Right.
And that's what our office tries to do and what everybody else tries to do. So. Yeah. So there's not even if we wanted to spend it on professional development materials or speakers,
right,
it's actually allocated for travel or for salaries or something. So,
Ms. Eckstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And your comments prompted me. I would love to see this up on top so that the public can see all the separate funds. So when somebody's talking about a line item, they actually see how many designated funds we have. So it's just not free money, but they know all these different areas. If we could put that up for the public the next time, I think that would be terrific.
Be glad to.
All right, other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Are we saying that we don't have discretion to move money from one designated?
Most of these line items are not.
Most are not. Some are allocated, some are unallocated.
I don't know of any that are. I'm just careful.
I thought I just heard something about monies being transferred from 317 or 311 to.
The state's doing that.
Basically shifted the pot from one fund and combined several funds into one. That was a state.
And that's 311 and 397. The state bundled it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's part of the shell game they played with us, right?
When they started consolidating funds to simplify things.
Yeah, they took some money with the base student costs and the way they did things. They were separate line items. They removed some of them, rolled some of them up, but didn't remove the responsibility for.
And I think that the plan from what I.
If you could.
If you don't mind, can you come to the mic so the folks that's watching online can hear your answer? That's okay.
From the trends that we've heard and seen in our meetings and, when we've talked with different folks in the delegation, I think the trend is to go towards consolidating a lot of these funds because like y'all have pointed out, there are a ton of funds. There are all kinds of different rules. It's a very cumbersome funding process. And I think that overall the consensus across the delegation is that we got to make this easier. And I think that there are steps towards that. However, all those rules don't always go away. And so while it does sound easier to put it all in one pot, if you're still having to do the same things and administer the same things, we're still accounting for it the same way, just in one line. So, and this is kind of new the last year or two. I think that'll continue. So it makes it harder to answer questions because there's shifts and you have to go through, remember, what did the state do with that pot? So I don't know if that helps at all, but that is kind of where they're going with things.
Did that answer your question, Ms. Shad? All right. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda, we have, sorry, I'm getting back to my agenda item here. The draft agenda for December 10th, 2019. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the board, before I review the draft agenda, I think if I take a moment of personal privilege, I think it's important for us to share with the public and those who are viewing, because this is a recording, that I think our board shows their very due diligence in asking some questions as it relates to the line items in the budget. One of the things I do not want to be missed in those questions is that our district is in a sound fiscal position. Right. And we're not in danger. So sharing this information, we are solid in our fiscal position, and we can meet the needs of our school districts with the budget that we have in place. And because of our spending practices in the direction of our board, we can cover those things that need to be covered for our students, whether they are at-risk students, whether they're students in our magnet programs, whether they're students if we need additional staff, therefore here and there. So we are in a sound fiscal position as it relates to a school district. And I think that should not be missed, because everyone cannot state that their organization is fiscally sound, whether it's a school district or a business, and for some of us, even households. So, and I'm speaking from my own experience. Oh, yeah. That being said, the Tuesday, December 10th, regular scheduled board meeting. This board meeting will be conducted with a call to executive session at 5:30, with the public session beginning at 6:30. We'll have our call to order, and we'll have our executive session items, student appeals, a student admission request to the district's adult education program. We'll have public session will resume at 6:30. We'll have our customary inspirational moment along with the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda. We'll have the school focus, which will be R2I2, public participation 1, and our legislative update will follow. But we'll also have our voting on executive session items, which would be the student appeals, the student admission request into the district's adult ed, and as needed for items discussed in executive session, should there be any. We'll have the old business no action requested, which will be the capital update, which will be our standing monthly capital update. We'll have old business action requested, and there is a litany or a list of J policies that we'll be voting on. Just as a reminder, we do have a special call board meeting workshop where those policies will be introduced for first reading. And so just to state for the record, these policies will be read and discussed specifically at a work session. I believe the work session is December the 3rd. And so if you're interested in listening to the discussion regarding the policies revisions to J, that will begin again December 3rd. And then we will vote on these items at the following December the 10th board meeting. We'll have a report. State of Kate will be our report for new business no action requested, along with a comprehensive annual fiscal report. And then we'll review items for the January 4th, 2020 board meeting. I believe that should be corrected. Is that right? Tamika? Right. Huh? I said 14th, 2020. It says 2019. I don't want to go back to 2019, January 2019. I want to go to 2020. We'll have the approval of the items as well as public participation to our board and superintendent comments. And if we needed a second executive session, and voting items in the executive session too, and then ask for an adjournment for that board meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? We will now move on to the next item, 14.1, which is the approval of the agenda items for the December 10th, 2019 meeting. If I can please have a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Mackey.
I move to approve the agenda items for the December 10th, 2019 board meeting.
Thank you very much. I have a motion by Ms. Mackey and a second by Mr. Shad. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. Motion passes 6-1. At this time, we'll have our, next on the agenda is our public participation number 2, which I have no one signed up for. And so we will now move on to item 16.1, which is our board and superintendent comments. I'll start at my left with Mr. Shad.
Thank you for everything. Y'all have a great night.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Thank you, and have a good night, and I need to get out for an appointment. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Dr. Caution Parker.
Thank you, and congratulations to our award-winning recipients this evening. And a special thank you to Dr. Helen Grant for all the work that you do and your team. It's outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes.
Y'all gonna kill me, but I have to say this. I just have to say that because we were on record, I want to make it perfectly clear that I think every board member that sits up here takes the time to examine each and every one of the children's appeals that come to us. As it was said earlier, it is not an easy decision to decide children's fate. And I think that everybody that sits on here, especially myself who has been an educator for 30-something years, I take it very seriously. I don't group anyone together because every situation is different. And I just felt the need to make a clarification for that because I want everyone to know that everyone sitting here, we take your children's life and their destiny serious. So I don't want it to be said that we're lumping children together as a whole, because I have never lumped anyone's child together because I wouldn't want anyone to lump my child together. I have children and I now have a grandson, and I take this position seriously. I had to say that, and with that, y'all have a good night.
Amen. Ms. Mackey.
The beautiful thing about going almost last is most of the comments have been taken. I echo my colleagues' sentiments with regard to the awards and all that have been here this evening. Veterans Day was yesterday, and of course, we thank you for your service. I also know that Principals Month was last month. School counselors is this month. There are a lot of wheels in the cog that make things work for the end user of the product that we serve, which is education. And I just want to take up, I know we're always thanking teachers, bless you, because you're never off duty. We thank the people who work in the classrooms. We thank the principals, but I mean, there are people who clean their living, their learning environments, people who prep fields, people who have to make sure that a debate is professional and the flags are hoisted in the morning and come down. There's a lot of people that are not in the classroom who make sure that you are able to educate our babies, and I'm just thankful. And I want to take a special note. I always thank the people who are in the room. Some of you have to be here, some of you do not. Just acknowledge those who have to be here, who have microphones. You know, Dr. Davis, of course, Mr. Kenyon, you know, Mr. Brown, who does the technology. I call him the most important person in the world because he's IT. You know, you get messed up with your IT, you're in a pickle there. Mr. Price, you know, Dr. Sheely, Miss Williams, Dr. Franklin, Dr. Miley, Dr. Davis, Dr. Grant, Mr. Smith, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Cramner, Mr. Gregory, Ms. Johnson, and there are a lot of faces I know in the audience, but I don't want to get into the trying to call all of your names because I'll leave somebody out invariably. But the folks who make sure those reports are done and have a whole lot of people to whom you are accountable, for whom you are accountable, I just wanted to say I thank you. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good evening and a good Thanksgiving. It's almost time to put Christmas lights up if you do that. But Thanksgiving for sure it's almost here. So have a good one. And I appreciate all of y'all.
Ms. Agostini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to recognize and thank Service Solutions for their donation and their commitment to Richland 2. Also, congratulations to all those who were recognized this evening. And finally, as a former Army wife, thank you to all of those who have served and continue to serve so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we have here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Again, in celebration of Veterans Day and in recognitions of Veterans Day, our schools have held many meaningful assemblies this week and last week. And on behalf of the Richland School District 2, I want to say thank you to the countless men and women and their families who serve and who are currently serving in United Armed Services. We're grateful and appreciative of your service, sacrifice, and commitment to protecting and preserving our freedoms. Richland 2 will hold a second public community meeting to get feedback on the rezoning proposal for Jacobs Creek and Forest Creek. This makeup meeting for parents who could not attend the first meeting will be held Monday, November the 25th at 6 p.m. at Bookman Road Elementary. Parents can also provide feedback using a form on the district's website. Richland 2 is proposing to rezone Jacobs Creek and Forest Creek subdivisions to from Catawba Trail Elementary to Bookman Road Elementary. The proposal will be up for final vote at the special call board meeting scheduled for December the 3rd. That meeting will begin, I believe, at 5:30. School choice. Families living in Richland 2 attendance zone are invited to the annual Choice and School Information Fair on Tuesday, December the 3rd at R2I2 Conference Center. Whether you are wanting to learn more about neighborhood schools or looking for information about a magnet program or expanded choice, this fair is for you. The elementary fair starts at 5:45 p.m., middle school starts at 6:15 p.m., and high school starts at 6:30. As mentioned in the legislative update earlier tonight, the South Carolina Board of Economic Advisors revised the general fund revenue estimates for the FY 2019-2020 and released their preliminary estimates for 2021. In total, due to these revisions, a higher personal income growth, the BEA estimates that the General Assembly will have almost $2 billion in new money to appropriate for the 2021. Again, they will have $2 billion in new money to appropriate for the FY 2021, $815 million in recurring funds, $815 million in recurring fund, and $1 billion in non-recurring funds. These additional funds provide the necessary funds. To fully fund the base student costs. They do fully fund the base student costs, although that's not something that's really being talked about, and hopefully we will forget about that, but apparently we have enough money to now provide the base student costs. The latest estimates to fully fund BSC is roughly about $500 million. The legislature could do that and still have more than $300 million in recurring funds to spend on other programs. That money could go a long way in increasing teacher pay, funding mental health counselors at every school, updating and growing the state's bus fleet, funding needs, among others, that we all can agree are critical to the safety and success of our students. And lastly, I'll say I wanted to reaffirm the position of this administration, and I think I can speak confidently and with some authority for the position of our board, that we strive very hard to be very transparent in this district and share a lot of information. And sometimes when you share a lot of information, criticism can come along with that, but that's what we're here for as leaders. We share a lot of information in regards to decisions that we make and the processes in which we make those decisions. We do welcome input and feedback from our community, from our parents, our business leaders, and all of those of you who reside in Richland School District 2 and who support our schools and our students. So I wanted to make that statement to say that, to address that we are always consciously working on how can we provide a better learning experience for our students, which includes reducing the suspension and expulsion rates for students, which includes making sure that our special education students needs are being met, which includes to ensure that our magnet programs are being fully funded and our students are getting the best possible education that they can receive, to ensure that we are doing the things that we need to do. And so we don't take those things lightly, and we are always open to meet with individual groups who want to discuss and partner with us in making decisions. What we cannot do is fall victim or begin to lean in one direction for one group, and then another group comes in and they have another set of priorities they want us to do, and we're going back and forth without a clear plan of what we need to do. Our goal and focus is on the entire school district, which includes every department and every division. And to get caught up into a single debate about one issue would not be beneficial for our schools. I say that in response to the idea that we are not open to talking about discipline. We do have a discipline workshop that is scheduled for November the 19th, I believe, which is next week, where we will discuss our discipline and our numbers openly for our public to see, again, in our efforts to be transparent and talk about the steps that we're making to ensure that we're doing all we can for our students in our district. Thank you so much for that time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And I also want to point out, I know we had a representative from More Justice that came and spoke to us today. And I want to be clear, last year while Ms. Agostini and I may have been the only ones there in person, Dr. Davis had already written a letter to More Justice and explained that we actually shared a vision for the direction that we were going with discipline and with some of the issues that they had. They actually referenced that letter, but they continued to point out because he was not there in person that somehow that minimized the work that we're doing in this district, or meant that we weren't just as dedicated to that shared vision for where we were going. I take exception to that. I take exception that just because some of my other board members may not have been there in person, that somehow that's any less interest to us as a board, or there's any less dedication to a lot of the issues that we have with them. I think that's a red herring to say just because a person doesn't show up to one meeting one day that somehow we are not dedicated to the work that we're doing in that area. And I take real exception to that. I have with that group for a while. As Dr. Davis says, we have lots of groups that come and want our time and attention to come to different meetings, to share vision with them, and we just can't always cater to individual groups the way that they want us to. Discipline has been something we worked very hard on. There's not one board member here that you haven't heard say that it's a focus and a priority for us to continue to improve. I also want to thank Ms. Williams and Dr. Davis from an HR perspective. Sometimes I feel like we give you guys not the right shake for the work that you do. Y'all are doing great work. Keep up the work that you're doing. I know you're out there recruiting hard, working hard in all parts of the state, the country, across the nation. We have one of the lowest vacancy rates in the state in our district. I think, how many new folks do we have? Over 300, over 500 folks this year. Y'all are working hard. Keep up the good work. Thank you for what you do for us in this district. I also want to echo the comments that Dr. Holmes made. This board takes every student very seriously. We always have when it comes to discipline, not just discipline as a whole, but each individual situation that comes before us. And we put a lot of time and effort into that. I will stand up to that and say that anywhere, anytime. I think it's something that certainly is a focus of this board and something that none of us take lightly. I think there was some mischaracterization of that process this evening. Otherwise, happy Thanksgiving, happy Veterans Day. Thank y'all. Enjoy your family time, and we will see you next meeting. Thank you. But can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Motion made by Mr. Shad, seconded by Dr. Holmes. Everybody raise your right hand. Passes unanimously.